Hey everyone, welcome to Brave Souls. My guest for tonight is Spirit Corley. She is an adoptee, and I can't wait for her to come on and share her adoption journey with all of you. So Spirit, whenever you come on, request to join in and we will get started shortly. And here she is. Hi Yale. Welcome. Hey Raya. Okay, going on with Spirit now. Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good, good.
Good.
Thanks
Can you
for
hear me
having me.
okay?
Pardon me?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can.
Good.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
How was your day?
It was good. It's been really busy. I moved by day with the Department of Labor, and so it's just a busy time for us. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about you?
It was good. I had to go into the office today, but I'm done. I work from home the next 2 days, so it's more relaxing.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working from home. I'm gonna turn my volume up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey Jim, welcome. Hey Keith. What were you saying?
no, we work from home um, since the pandemic, but we're thinking about just keeping this structure. It's
Yeah.
because we're a large department, and with COVID and all of that, we're never really going to go back to our normals. We have
Yeah.
new normals now, so
I know. I go in the office 2 days a week and then I'm home 3 days.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I like working from home.
I do too. I do too. It's very relaxing. I can stay in my pajamas all day and I love it. I do love it.
Yeah, that's what I do. I'll have like my work clothes from this part up, and then my workout clothes from
Oh,
my
same.
waist down.
Sometimes when I'm live, like I'm a little more dressed down right now, but usually I'll have like a fancier top and I'll be
Uh,
in shorts or pajama pants or whatever.
uh,
I'm just like, that's fine. They only see me from here up, so
right. Yeah, that's kind of what I do most days.
yeah.
So,
So I'm gonna give it like another just 30 seconds just to see if anyone else will come on, and then we'll get started. Sound good?
okay, sounds good.
We have a few people on right now. I don't know if you can you see who's on or no?
No, I can just see that there are people on, but I can't actually see who they are. I
Okay,
don't
so
want to. I don't want to touch anything below, like the comments, because I don't
no,
want
it's okay.
to.
It's okay. So we have about 5 people on right now. We have from Gypsy to Jersey is Yale, Raya. We have Jim, Sereno. We have Keith. Katia just joined. Hi, Katia. So yeah, we have about a few people on right now.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I guess we can start. Um, any for anyone who comes on late or is not able to join, or for you, I always save the live, so you can go right back to my page. It usually gets posted right after we're done, so you can see it automatically or immediately, and I'll tag you in it, and then yeah. So if anybody wants to watch, they can go back and watch it there.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to tag my biological half sister who follows me on Instagram.
Oh,
So
okay.
we share the same father. So
Okay.
um, interesting getting to know her. We're only several months apart, and we sound alike, and we have so many different quirky things. It's kind of been interesting getting to know her.
Yeah.
So
Well, why don't we start from the very beginning?
sure.
And just start from when you were younger. For why I guess what led your birth mom to put you up for adoption, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so my name is Spirit Corley. I was born in Southern California, relinquished in the county of Los Angeles through a private adoption. And I was just going to really package everything because I have a lot of history based on my search journey. But I had joined Ancestry.com in about, I think it was like 2016 perhaps. connected with second cousins and so forth. You know, I had spent many years searching for my biological. At that time, it was about 25 years I had been searching, spending lots of money and a lot of energy, and it really wasn't working based on that.
Spirit, you froze. I could still hear you,
Oh,
but you froze.
I don't know. Am I unfrozen now?
Yeah, it's still froze. Okay, now you're good.
Okay.
Now you're good.
I'm sorry. I like maybe I should turn my let me see if I turn my laptop off. We've had issues with our Wi-Fi in the area today,
Mm-hmm.
so sorry.
It's
Am I
okay.
okay now?
Yeah, you're okay now.
Okay, I'm like, should I just move?
It's okay.
Um, so joining Ancestry.com and with all the previous searching that I had done prior, starting at the age of 22,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll kind of go back to that story because that's kind of like where it all started. But I finally found my birth mother and birth father, the family, through Ancestry. Even though I had been on television shows, had spent so much money with private investigators searching,
Yeah.
that it was one woman who was a second cousin on Ancestry who was really good at genealogy. And we didn't know how we were connected because I don't have any information about that kind of information about my biological mother or father.
Mm-hmm.
But she was just really good at kind of prompting me and sharing with me what certain things meant. And it was like several years. It wasn't until 2018 that I finally found my biological father's family first, most of the family, and then my biological mother's nephew who was on there. He's a young gentleman, and my cousin's like, you need to just call him, ask him some questions. I'm like, no, I don't want you. I kind of have just, I had really given up. I
Yeah.
figured it just wasn't my, it just wasn't going to happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it was probably 27 years in.
That's a
And
long
so
time.
a long time. I can tell you, hiring private investigators, you spend about 5 grand. Um,
Yeah, I know.
and I had done that a few times, different agencies and such. But she made a call to this one young man, and I gave her all the information, and she called him. He's like, "That sounds like my aunt," and he's like, "Well, hold on a second." So he calls her, and sure enough, that's my biological mother. However, this young gentleman was contacting me. He had contacted me a year before, but like I said, I kind of had given up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really weird how all the different pieces just started falling into place shortly thereafter through Ancestry DNA. And like I said, working with my cousin, that it was just weird how just like all of a sudden I got all the information. I found my half sister, who my dad was,
Yeah.
my biological mother, and all of that. But it wasn't one of those things that was instantaneous,
Mm-hmm.
nor was it like this fairy tale. Oh my gosh, now everything is wonderful and beautiful.
Of course not.
It's a journey, and it's a
Yeah.
never-ending journey because you don't reach a destination just because you found your biological family,
Mm-hmm.
because then the whole another piece of your life comes into play after that. And so like I was kind of going back to the first time I started my search. I was 22 years old. I left home kind of just out of high school, really bad situation at that time, and I had really grappled with my identity, my self-worth, those things that were a lot of us adoptees experience. And so I remember at 22, I interviewed my original social worker. She was actually my birth mom, so social worker.
Okay.
I had harassed that department so many times. They're like, we're just gonna finally see her, but my adoption was closed. So
It's
they just keep
harder.
it very sterile, very matter of fact. If you get anything, you're lucky, and then it's all blacked out.
Yeah.
And so she came out of retirement, and this is something that I was kind of coached on, that they'll leave the room and they'll leave her file there. And I was with a friend. Sure enough, she did that. She left the room, but my file was like maybe 1 or 2 pages in my file. I did grab it, and I
Yeah.
started trying to write down a lot of things, but I was so emotional, so distraught that I really couldn't get what I really needed in that meeting. And they tell you, you can ask yes questions, you can ask no questions. We'll say yes or we'll say no. And it's just very prescriptive. So I learned a lot in that first meeting. I was traumatized after that because a lot of the stuff that I thought I had was kind of inaccurate, but I had bits and pieces. And then from 22 years old all the way through until I was like 52, I'm 55 now. And that those 30 years, I can tell you, it was just not one of those things that you're just like you're searching because you realize during your physical search for your biological family, you're also searching for something that's a part of you,
Yeah.
not necessarily just the missing parts, but the wholeness, the completeness, and just being able to tell a story through a different lens. And those are the things that I had to experience, as well as how do I forgive myself so when I do get to meet my birth mother, I'm able to be forgiving towards her. Because when I was 22, and if I would have met her then, oh, it would have been it would have been a totally different person.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I was able to offer myself forgiveness along that journey so that I would be able to forgive her the day when the day came that I would actually meet her, because she was not receptive automatically at meeting me even when I talked to her nephew. It wasn't instantaneous. And I had to have compassion, and be compassionate about her story, whatever her story was, because I really didn't know. I had this assumption based on what her story could have been. Like, what kind of person gives away a beautiful baby girl, and so I had to do a lot of inner work along that 30-year search journey, being able to love myself, everything about me, the good, bad, the ugly, the wounds, the trauma, all of that, so that I can be able to offer her that love, because that was not always the case. That was not
No, it's
where I
not.
was.
It's definitely not. Ingrid said, "Do you feel all the love?" She's so proud of you.
Oh.
Welcome to everyone who just joined, by the way. I was waving, but welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Please
Hello.
continue.
Yeah. And I think it's just interesting. Like when I was on Ancestry DNA and I had been working with a television show, I have a background in the television industry, as well as what I do now, that it was just, you just don't realize when you're doing that search journey, like we're in the physical part of it. And there's so much trauma within our community that it was alarming to me when I joined Ancestry DNA, and then also Instagram. I didn't even realize Instagram and Facebook. I didn't realize there were all these different groups for adoptees. I was winging it alone,
Spirit, that's the
solo.
conversation I have with pretty much everyone that comes on with me, because it really is like we didn't even know these communities existed before last year, or at least for me too. Like I was like,
Yeah,
I started like, you meet one adoptee and then you meet them all.
right.
And it's just like, you're like, oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life?
Right. Well, that's kind of how I had this like epiphany yesterday, because I think Bethany reached out to me. I'm like, oh my God, Michelle, Ingrid, and Bethany. I feel like I have like this adoptive family, like I'm building and I'm creating, and it's kind of interesting. So it's been really neat to kind of get to know you ladies, because I'm like thinking, it feels like you have another family based on people that identify with you, because you know, adoptees we are our own like culture, breed, and nucleus of people that no one else would understand who we are and the way we think, all those different things, unless you are that.
If you let, yeah, exactly.
And so it's, to me, it's almost like a nationality. And when I was growing up, it's just like, I'm adopted, like, that's who I am, because, it's part of my story, and so it's just interesting, connecting with people on social media, and then also being really cognizant of a lot of what the stories, the posts, and what you read, and you start to kind of see that the trends based on our trauma, all the things that most of us can connect to and or have experienced at some point in our lives. So it was really interesting to kind of read them. I think I look at it through a different lens, because I'm on the other side of, like, I would say, recovery,
The healing process.
Definitely. So absorbing all of that energy of the hurt, the pain, the sadness it has been a challenge because I'm an empath, and so I take in a
Same.
lot of, yeah, I take in a lot of energy. So
Mm-hmm.
I would just tell some people, anyone, that no matter where you are in your journey, because I can tell you based on my own trauma from being very young, and finding out that I was adopted as a little kid and being teased, and all the things that I did to myself because of the pain, the hurt, the wounds, that I know it sounds cliche, and people, you know, say, "Oh, it doesn't. You don't know that it's gonna get better, but it does get better." And I think that when I read a lot of things and engage with people, it's just like, hang on, find that lifeline while you're doing that search journey, and the
Yes.
journey to be able to find that piece and part of yourself where you feel okay,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just a lot that happens to us, not
Yeah.
always for us,
It's
but
not cliche, it's hope.
yeah, it
It's to
is
have that hope.
definitely. Because I can tell you, I've been through hell and high water. Just being,
Welcome. I'm raising my hand.
oh,
And I'm sure everybody on here is are raising their hands too.
there is, yeah,
I'm sure they are. I mean, we all have our own different trauma, and
yeah,
it's
and
sad.
and that trauma, for me, it was an opportunity to really like to want to, I wouldn't say fix myself because there was nothing wrong with me, but it was my way of how I looked at other things. And like I said, at that point, I didn't know my biological mother, but I didn't think very highly of her at that time, you know?
Yeah.
And even when I finally found her and all that I had gone through, and she was just not receptive at first, because there's a whole other dynamic that comes to that based on your search and what you find. Be careful what you're looking for because you just might find it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to definitely be prepared. And I believe because of all the work that I had done on myself, that it hurt my feelings at first that she was not receptive. And she her family had to do like a whole audit of who I was. And she's successful. Oh, she owns this and da 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 da. So I thought, okay, well, you go through that. Um, but I had to let that go because I know that me finding her, I was not searching for my mother. I was
Mm-hmm.
searching for my biological mother, um, to be able to just fill the gap in some spaces in my life. And so I wasn't approaching her like I needed her.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas had I found her 10, 20 years ago, or even when I was 22, I would have been looking for her for different reasons. And those are the things I had to realize for myself. So when I approached her finally, I came to her as a whole person, and she has nothing but respect for me because it's not like, I'm dumping this trauma on her, but I had to have some very clear boundaries
Yes.
because you're approaching a whole different part of your life that you're never prepared for it because you never know what's going to happen once you find them. And you have to still keep doing a lot of work in yourself, a lot of healing, because some things will come up for yourself. Some things will come up. For me, I feel like I'm a well-balanced, emotionally intelligent person.
Yeah.
um, but I have sometimes when I think about certain things and I have to kind of process it. And you never stop that. You're always going to have to find that space. So my journey and my experience has been interesting. And I'm still in the newness of it because
Mm-hmm.
I finally met her for the first time October 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's still pretty new. Ironically, where I grew up in Southern California, I now live in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I've been here for 17 years. However, I'm from Southern California, and where I was raised was only like less than 30 minutes from where she lived.
Mm-hmm.
And her brother and his family lived right around the corner from me. And I didn't have any idea.
Small world.
But my mother is an administrator. My adoptive mother is an administrator, retired, so
Mm.
she knew the family, but and the last name is my birth mom's last name that was on my non-ID information. But Jones is such a common name.
Yeah.
You never really know. But yeah, it was just kind of interesting about all those things that you kind of find out
Mm.
on your journey.
Yeah.
So
So what oh actually there's just a couple. Hi from Poland. Hi, welcome. Well, hi from Philadelphia. Sending
hello.
you to love, sending it right back at you. Welcome to everyone who just joined. Um so we spoke about this before, but for everyone else, what about your biological father? What do you know about him?
Yeah, so my biological father, he was murdered at the age of 30. So I was, at that time, I would have been 10 when he was murdered. I look like his identical twin in the pictures that I've seen of him. Yeah, and so I actually found most of my biological father's family first through Ancestry DNA. But it was still kind of like, well, who, it was still like cousins that would come in. Oh, she looks like so and so. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
she looks like so and so. So it took like a, a couple years before on Ancestry DNA before I actually kind of solved the puzzles. But yeah, so anyway, my sister Danya, who I was trying to tag, I'm sure hopefully she's watching.
Oh, well, if you give me
We
her information, I can also tag her when I put the
Okay.
video
Yeah, so she and I are like 4 months apart.
up.
So our dad was pretty busy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and she lives in Wisconsin, but it's been really neat getting to know her because actually after I found some information about him on Ancestry or his family, about a year later she came on, and it's like the Centimorgans for she and I were like super close, and I'm like, oh my god, she has to be something really close. And then looking at her picture, but then when I heard her voice,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I was talking to myself. So it was the
Oh, that's so
weirdest thing.
funny.
Yeah, so we're close.
That's good.
Hmm.
That's awesome. So I wanted to circle back a little bit. What was it like for you growing up as an adoptee? You mentioned childhood bullying, which same thing happened to me. But what was it like? Were you giving like what was it like with with other kids, with you and your adoptive parents?
It was hard. I learned that I was adopted probably around the age maybe 3. I was really young.
Early, yeah.
We were all playing, the kid back then, the kids would play in the on the street, and they didn't matter what age you were. And I remember some of the kids coming up to me and says, "You're adopted. You know you're adopted." And I was like, super young.
Oh.
I don't even think I knew what that meant. All I knew is that I do not look like my adoptive brother, who is 3 years older than myself. He's West
Mm-hmm.
Indian. And then my adoptive parents, then there's me. I look nothing like them. And so I think I remember us having a conversation with my adoptive mother, who was a published author. And so she wrote a book during her thesis program
Mm-hmm.
or master's program, um, about the adoption experience. And she read us the book. And that's kind of how we learned, after
Oh,
we were
okay.
being bullied, or I was being bullied about being adopted. And so that's how we kind of learned the story. And my parents, we grew up very, in a really, I think, upper middle class. My mother is a very educated, PhD education, and
Mm-hmm.
my dad owned his own business. And so I grew up, I wouldn't say really well, I mean, well, as far as materialistically, but, it was very challenging because during those times, adoption was not common, and particularly within the African American community. Like you said, adoption, they're like, it was like, it was not common.
Yeah.
Typically an African American family would take a child that was born from out of wedlock, a niece or daughter, and a grandmother, aunt, mother, or someone else would take that child in. Typically, that historically is our what happens. So when I was adopted, especially through a private adoption, that it just really was not very common.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was, I mean, it was kind of like one of those conversations, oh, she's adopted. So you really didn't know how to like deal with that then. I don't think it became more
Yeah.
progressive until like later on. And so you just kind of felt different. And I think I felt different because of how other people perceived it. It wasn't like I felt shame about it, but I think that other people, you know, for instance, oh, going to the doctor's office, having your whatever exam, they ask you history. Even when you're like
Mm-hmm.
12, they're going to ask you history, and you're like, oh, I'm adopted.
Yeah, I know. I do. I have to put on, unknown for everything.
Yeah, so it was those kind of things that you kind of notice when you're growing up, like
Mm-hmm.
you dread going to the doctor. Oh God, I'm gonna have to tell him, he's gonna ask me this question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I talked about this before when I told you my diagnosis, that I didn't know that my birth mom had a similar diagnosis. But when you're doing your search, and when I was young, because when you're 21, that's when I was able to get my non-ID information.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get all the generic nebulous information about the circumstances of your relinquishment or your placement or whatever the language, I can't remember what they'd used back then. Um, but typically, if your birth mom was young, she's probably not going to even have any health history to document, or she may not even know anything because she's pretty young.
Exactly.
And so I remember, I had no medical history, no whatever. So I remember when I started having certain things happen along when I was maybe in my 20s and 30s or whatever, and never having any information to share with the doctor. Oh, well, on my birth mom or my mom's side, father's side, and you just kind of are really hyper focused on that,
Mm-hmm.
even as a young adult, and you're like, oh God, I just like. So I remember that was one of my motivators for like actually starting my search when I was like 22.
Mm-hmm.
But I think growing up, just the fact of my lack of identity and me not seeing myself in anyone else bugged me. It really bothered me a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't like just because you look a certain way that you should be happy and those things. Because I was always looking for myself to see me in someone else's eyes. My mother was a historian, my adoptive mother, so she, her family they had such great rich history, and she had all these beautiful pictures and all these things, and I was just like, I would always be entranced by that, but I also knew at a young age that wasn't my story. you know Even though that's my family, that wasn't my story. Those and you know that. So I would say the hardest part for me when I was growing up was just the lack of identity. And then that translates later on into your lack of self-love, because if you can't really love yourself fully, and it's because you feel like there's something missing. And identity is such a huge part of who we are intrinsically, that especially for women, I think for women is harder for us. That I had a hard
Oh,
time.
for sure.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that. And then when I started out of high school, I left home, bad circumstances, but I started working in the healthcare industry as well as going to college. And then at night I would work on all the television shows. My ex, he was a television producer. And I remember when I started doing that, I was only doing that because I thought, surely somebody's going to look at me and notice me and recognize me
Oh,
now. I mean, that was like my idea. I was like, okay,
oh.
I was
The
on a Fresh
things
Prince.
we put ourselves through to
Yeah,
get
I was
something
on
that
Fresh
is.
Prince of Bel-Air, Different World, Bill Cosby, all the shows. And then I worked on all the shows because I would do stand-in for Halle Berry, Lisa Bonet, blah, blah, blah. But I always thought, I'm doing this because somebody's going to recognize me. When I was on the cover of Essence magazine, I was like, for sure, someone's going to see me and they're going to find me. And it was just my young naiveness thinking that if I'm out here and I was modeling in New York, I was doing every kind of show with every kind of designer. I did
Mm-hmm.
tons of commercials, but I only did it because I thought surely my biological mother or someone's going to see this person and know that they belong to them. Well, that never really happened. But I found out, like, later on, that they're like, oh yeah, I remember that cover or that television show or commercial, blah blah blah. But in my young mind, I
You
was
know
doing
what?
it.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but somebody's about to leave, and I know they had MTMBMN had a couple things, and I don't want them to leave without me commenting.
Okay.
Stay on if you're still here. They want to know, how did you avoid feeling shame, do you
How do
think?
I avoid feeling shame?
Yeah. Or if you did.
I don't. It's not. It's something that's you can't. It's unavoidable because what you're feeling is a valid feeling for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
and my title of my book right now is Shame on Me, because I
Oh,
carried that shame. Like I would always say, I was born with a burden on my back. So you feel the weight of that.
mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how young you are or how old you are, you feel that weight. So being able to deal with the shame was like dealing with what were the causes of that,
Right.
not the shame itself, because, if I have a lack of identity and I feel bad about that, and it makes me feel ashamed, then I need to figure out what it is and work on it. And I did so much work on myself, and it was hard because I was like a hellraiser. I did everything I could to deflect.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know but when you get to the point where you don't want to feel that pain
mm-hmm.
from, if it's the shame, the sadness, the trauma, and you start trying to do the work, and that work is not easy, then those things, you start to release that, and it's like shedding skin.
Mm-hmm.
The shame doesn't just go away, because the shame manifests in different ways. And that's one of the things I had to realize. I had to give myself grace. I had
Yes.
to be gentle with myself, because this is my story, my journey, and I had to stop trying to figure out, oh God, am I hurting my adopted parents by doing this? And I had
Mm-hmm.
to start just focusing on what I felt like, and all those little different pieces and parts, those fragments, whatever they are, whatever you want to call them, shame, guilt, all those different things. You don't They don't just go away, but you learn to nurture them in a way that they don't take a hold and a grip of you.
Right.
You know, I don't know if that answers the question, but you
I'm not
know,
sure if there's, I'm sure it does, but I don't know if they're here, if they
okay.
heard it, but I wanted you to answer in case they decided to stay to listen.
Okay.
Um, just wanted to see if anyone else. So Korean, oh, so I'm sorry, Jim said, I agree, Hispanic culture also. I was adopted in 1962. Jim was just recently on, was a guest, and he's amazing. We actually we're going to do a part two because there's so much more he wanted to talk about and I wanted to hear. But it was really, really amazing live.
That's
Um,
awesome.
Korean adopted, it's hard to love yourself if you can't see yourself. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Welcome to everyone who just joined. Ingrid, I'm thinking the same for some reason. That was when you were talking about the you were like, I guess, of being on TV, you did it to hope like someone would see you and
Yeah,
recognize you.
I did. It was funny. I mean, that was like my main motivation, just to be seen. We
Mm-hmm.
all want to be seen,
Absolutely,
you know.
seen, heard,
Yeah.
acknowledged. Yeah.
And so
Uh,
that's a part of I would say, our pathology, if you will, because there's,
mm-hmm.
like I was telling you earlier, the culture of adoptee, our culture, there's very intrinsic things that are very common that happen to us, our
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and how we perceive them. And so, like I said, it's almost like speaking another language. And
Yeah.
with that, there's levels to it, and you learn to evolve and be okay with certain things, and you understand them, because, oh yeah, I know what that is, whether it be the shame or all the other things that we attach ourselves to,
Mm-hmm.
that is just very interesting. And like I said, when I started really like finding out there's these adoptee groups, and on Instagram, it blew me away. I'm like, oh my God, there's just like I was just like, I was kind of like, where this is like, it was like being like in Wakanda for adoptees.
Right.
It
Oh
was kind
gosh,
of
that's
funny.
funny. That is funny. Korean adopted said, can't wait to read your book.
Thank you.
Where can
Thank
you is your book on Amazon, or where can
I'm
people pick
I'm
up?
I'm working on it. My and this is part of the work that I've been doing on myself because like I said, when you find your biological family, it's not an end to your whole journey. It's like
Mm.
actually a start of a new one.
Yes, it's a
Um,
new chapter.
it's a new chapter. So when I was writing my
Hmm.
book, and there were, most of it is like from journals, from journaling or experiences for the last 30 years.
Hmm.
Um, but I got to a place where I'm always trying to be okay. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want to
Hmm.
say something about, someone and they're going to get their feelings hurt. I had to really release that because in order to be authentic about my story, I
Hmm.
have to be able to tell my story. And as I have said, I did a talk last year with Women Creating Our Futures. It's kind of like a TED talk.
Hmm.
And I've worked with some of the great leaders. My brother is a prolific spiritual leader. He's known globally. And so like working with certain people, when you learn to stand on your story and be empowered with that. And that's where I've chosen to stay. But it took me a lot of work to be able to stand on my story instead of standing in my story. And when you're in your story, you're telling your story from a place of still being wounded in a way. So when I started like really working on my book, oh gosh, even way long before I found my birth mom, the title of my book is "Shame on Me," because
Hmm.
that is where I have been. But I'm maybe going to change that because I don't know. But it is shame on me in the sense of the things that I carried with me. Like I said, having that burden on my back,
Hmm.
allowing myself the opportunity to release it and free myself of that. So I'm kind of like at a place right now. I want to finish it this year because I want to like finish it by our October anniversary when we met, my birth mom and I. So
Oh,
that's kind of like my
I love
goal.
that.
Yeah,
Good
I'm
for
shooting for
you.
that.
Good for you. It'll happen.
Yeah, thank
It'll
you.
happen. Welcome, Bethany. Just joined, our girl Bethany.
Hey, Bethany.
Jim said that's where the people pleaser comes from, to be seen. Oh yes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, of course. Definitely that, um, not wanting to hurt someone else's feelings, even though you take on that hurt. There's a lot of projection that happens to us, for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. Um, and even now, like sometimes when I talk to if you're talking to your adoptive mother and your biological mother, and both my mothers have the same name.
Mm-hmm. Oh
They,
really?
they have the same name. And,
Oh
and it's
wow.
funny because my cousin that was helping me search has the same name as they all have the same name. Even like having conversations with both of them
Mm-hmm.
and maybe one you say, oh, I talked to my birth mom today. And I try to like kind of like make light gloss over it because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. You know, I don't think it's not as I think if I would have found my biological mom years ago, my adoptive mom would have taken more issue with it. I think once I had to really, like I said, create those boundaries based on non-negotiables about my search and
Mm-hmm.
being able to approach it in a way that I'm an adult and that you've done the parenting, so it's like you have to respect what I'm doing. It took a lot for me to be able to have those crucial conversations with my adoptive mom.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had to like kind of figure that out. It's kind of weird, And my biological mom, she loves to have the center of attention. She likes to, she's,
Well,
she
I wanted
didn't,
to ask you, what are your adoptive mom and your birth mom? What is the relationship between them? Do they talk, or no?
they
Have they
haven't met,
met?
they've never talked. And that's interesting. Well, because I don't, my adoptive parents lived 5.5 hours from me. Well, my dad just passed away, but, and my biological mom is in LA. And I don't think I was ever in a place where I felt like, oh, okay, it's time for them to talk to each other. She's talked to my cousin that actually found her or, called her, but maybe next week when I visit my adoptive mom, maybe I'll have them talk. Um, and see how that goes.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how that would go, them
Yeah.
meeting.
They're both very super intelligent women. My birth
Mhm.
mom is an engineer. My adoptive mom is very well educated. So they're both, I think they're very well-rounded individuals. But you still have that piece. I'm a mom, so I know how it is. Like you still have that,
Yeah.
you're territorial in a way. But as long as everyone feels okay, I do a pretty good job about separating my time with them.
Hmm.
But my birth mom is really, I should even say that she's trying to get back what she lost. And it
Oh,
took her a long time to like admit that she's trying to go back to that little girl that she didn't know, to bring that back. And those kind of conversations are really interesting, that
hmm,
she wants that baby girl. I'm like, well, you don't even know that baby girl, because I have the picture of the day I was adopted, and I show that to her. I said, you don't even know anything from beyond this point about what that baby looks like. And that
yeah.
was such a beautiful baby. But you know
I'm
she
sure you were.
she made her choice. And I will say this about that, because when you find out the real truth of your adoption, because sometimes on your records it may not be the whole truth, you just have the
Mhm.
very, how they package it
The
very well for
basics.
you. you
Yeah.
know so when you really get to have that conversation with either your biological mother or father, it has to be done with the open heart, because there may be some things that they may say that
Hmm.
they're not trying to hurt your feelings necessarily, but is their way of protecting. Like she will say, I don't regret giving you up, or I don't regret placing you for adoption. And at first it made me really pissed off. I was like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you don't regret that?
Like, well, thanks.
And that took me a while to kind of work through that. What does that really mean for her? Because I know her actions don't reflect that, because you can't have these conversations with me and you want to like kind of take me back to, oh, that baby, or I wish I would have had those experiences, if there was not some kind of regret there. So
Hmm.
you have to really be just very in tune with yourself and your feelings, to be very, just very candid, because some things are, yeah, there's some sore spots that can
Yeah,
be open
sure.
wounds.
For sure.
Hmm.
Um, Jim said, "You're that red ribbon in the middle of that rope."
You said what was that?
You're that red ribbon in the middle of that rope.
Oh yeah.
Bethany said, "Tough conversations with a mom, adopted mom, is not easy." I agree. No, conversations with our adoptive parents are not easy. I just had one recently, and it's not easy. Not it didn't really change anything, but
Yeah.
it's definitely not. It helped me definitely, but it's not easy at
Yeah.
all. Jim said, "Yep, I'm 20 years of finding bio mom and still learning about secrets." Yeah.
It could be, it's very interesting. And and I think that was one of the reasons why I kind of like stopped with my book,
Mm-hmm.
because there were some things I wanted to clarify or have from my birth mom. But then
Mm-hmm.
I had to think about it. I'm like, okay, this is not her story. This is your story. So whether or not she's going to tell you everything, I know there's a lot of things I know that she doesn't know, that I've learned, but it's not like a secret. It's just part of, the searching.
Yeah.
Um, but I had to be okay with it. I said, okay, I have to be okay with whatever the story is, whether
Mm-hmm.
that part of the story includes me or not, because this is my story and she has her story. So I had to learn to honor that. But I was just like, man, I wish you would just like talk.
I know.
But it's all good. I think I've learned enough, and I've learned enough about myself along
Mm-hmm.
this journey, that um I'm okay. And as I continue to evolve and grow, and figure out how certain things, how they work in my new life,
Mm-hmm.
I never would have met. I have been searching for 30 years. So, you get to a point where you just don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
So I swear, 30 years, 22, I started, 52. And that was, oh my gosh, when I look back over those 30 years and what I went through, the torment, and some things were right before my eyes, based on
Yeah.
where she was,
Yeah.
that when I moved from California to Colorado, I realized all along I had her address. I had all these things that when I started going through some things, I'm like, holy crap. How come I didn't know, but I had so much information.
Mm-hmm.
So like from so many different searches and um, a TV show that was working with me a couple years ago, I think was Finding Your Family. They actually did find her, but she didn't respond to the inquiry. I
Oh.
found that out after we actually met. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, how many other letters did you get? Because I'm sure, once I started like seeing that I actually had information about her already, I had her address. I had it for years and did not, I was like, did I ever send a letter to this address? Because it's her address. I remember first time going to her house and I looked through my old notes. I'm like, oh my God, all this time. It was just so weird. So
Wow.
weird how some things kind of just unfolded. It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Wow. Wow. Um, so Spirit, as we're wrapping up, we have about a few minutes left. Do you have anything that you want to, that we didn't talk about that you want to share?
There's some, like there's been so many things that have happened, but I just want to say, to whomever is on their search journey, whatever journey they're on, being an adoptee, is just give yourself grace. Be gentle with you along the way, because you deserve that, and um, just enjoy the experience for whatever it's worth to you. Because for me, I had to find that joy, because I was just like, it became a job.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, so but it's been beautiful. So hopefully I'll finish that book this year, and
Yeah.
I'll be able to share a lot of just what the things the tools that have helped me along the way,
Mm-hmm.
during that search journey, because it was I needed those lifelines, I needed those tools, and I needed something to sustain me while I was going through this whole process. So
Mm-hmm.
but thank you, Michelle, for having me on and
Yeah,
getting to
you're
know you.
welcome. Of course. So, I usually end with two questions. You actually already answered one, and the one was, what advice would you give to adoptees? You gave that advice. If you want to add more, you can. But if you want to just keep what you gave, it's also great.
I would say, like I said earlier about forgiveness, forgiveness of yourself first, so that when the opportunity comes, when you meet that family, is that you're able to be forgiving to them, whatever their story is. Compassion, be compassionate for yourself,
Yeah.
give yourself that space to just be okay, and to allow yourself to heal so that you can offer that same type of compassion to your biological family. And then lastly, just love yourself 100%, totally and
Yeah.
completely,
Yeah.
because you deserve it, and you'll be able to offer that same type of unconditional love to your loved ones and your family. So thank you.
That's beautiful. And then the second question is, what advice do you have for adoptive parents?
Do you do some good reflective work? I would hope that being an emotionally intelligent, a potentially adoptive family would be a priority.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to adopt outside of your race, be very strong in the fact of your whys, know your whys,
Mm-hmm.
and just be very educated. And don't be ashamed to reach outside of your comfort network for people that can support you along that journey. And then be courageous enough to share that adoption story with your children, as at a point where you think that is it's safe and it's okay, but to be able to be open and share that story, because as adoptees we carry that shame, because that shame is something that we learn from those who are raising us, our adoptive parents. So the shame that you have or whatever you're carrying in, you're projecting it on us. So
Yeah.
as an I know there's a lot of issues, with the whole adoption and it being a business, but there are good experiences that can come from it, but
Absolutely.
be whole, be ready, do your work, be open and be available to that child.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect advice. Well, thank you everyone for joining tonight. Thank you, lady. You're welcome. Thank you, Ingrid. Or you're welcome, Ingrid. You're welcome, Ryan. Be courageous. Yes. Way to go, Michelle, for this. You are such a brave soul. Keep on thriving, Queen, all while inspiring others to do the same and so much more. Oh, thank you, Ingrid. I couldn't do this without all of you, too. So thank you,
Is that
everyone.
Ingrid?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, yeah, it's been a neat getting to know you, Ingrid and Bethany. I'm like, oh, I have like a little family.
Yeah. I do love the adoptee family, and it just keeps growing. So
Definitely.
I love it. Well, everyone, have a wonderful night. Thank you for tuning in. Spirit, I was about to call you Ingrid. Spirit, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
with me and sharing your story. And keep inspiring, keep writing that book, keep being a light, and you are definitely courageous and brave.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Okay.
Bye
Have a good
bye.
night. Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.